Okay, how do you apply a risk-based model? You need to essentially be able to identify infrastructure which is going to be internal and external, which should have applied in the same sense even today if you had your internal environment and an external outsourced environment. You have the requirements library, which essentially says these are the laws and regulations that apply to me. These are my internal policies. These are my standards that apply. These are the external standards that I want to conform to. Then you're saying that how does that apply to my infrastructure, whether it's internal or external, whether it's a managed provider or internal. Then crisis and incident management. If you're talking about significantly outsourced or significant operations which are in the cloud, how is crisis and incident management for that particular environment going to be managed? Reporting and accountability framework. Today I work with a couple of large organizations which have mastered the outsourcing concept. They have built their entire environment on outsourcing and they have only retained their core operations. But even in that environment, reporting and accountability, what is the internal IT governance, what is the security governance and other structures that you have put in place, what is the reporting and accountability of the third party provider to you? This applies to you whether it's in a provider is essentially saying I'm going to go into the cloud. You may need to rethink your contracts, you may need to rethink your services, because what you previously did, you went, for example, let's say you have a person who is doing your some amount of customer data analytics or your help desk. Previously, what would you have done? You would have gone into the data center, looked at his facilities, audited his environment, and all of a sudden he's saying that I am taking all of my facilities or all of my infrastructure and outsourcing that to a cloud provider. So you'll have to rethink those particular strategies as to how those traditional models apply to you. Risk management, rationalization of the requirement library, the policies, building your risk register and control baseline. All your existing risk registers apply, but now let's say there is one segment of operation, for example, let's say payroll. Payroll and you're going to put it on the cloud because somebody it's a bad example, but let me just go through that thought. But let's say you're putting it into the cloud where somebody is providing you the payroll services, you need to start thinking about the security and privacy of that information. You need to start thinking about the availability of that information, the tax and legal regulations. So you need to start enhancing your existing risk register. To be noted is enhancing your existing risk register, because there are traditional models already available in the managed services mode which you can take and then work on. Then apply control baselines. What is it that you're willing to live with, what you're not willing to live with, and what are those control standards that they need to comply with. Risk and control assessment, these I'm assuming most of you already do. And then you have your monitoring and reporting that you need to do on an ongoing basis, vendor risk management, right, VAPT. Today, the vulnerability management and other programs that you have are not completely geared to the cloud services providers environment. So you would need to rethink your vulnerability management program itself in terms of your VAPT and all that you conduct if you're really thinking of getting into a cloud environment. What we have is a risk intelligence map which we have built over the last 2.5 years, working with organizations, working with service providers. We have an entire map. We have what we call as broad risk categories, we have risk subcategories, and then we have individual areas. So for example, if you were taking your technology operations and we were to dissect it, when you come down to this particular level is where we will essentially be able to provide you the fine-grained risk and controls that you need to establish there. So if you were moving your cloud, your existing operations in the cloud, what we would do is use a risk map like this, which we would then apply to your environment, say what risks apply, and then drill it down to your specific environment and apply it and come out to the control statement. And we do what we call as, if you take your traditional risk and control matrix, aligning it to the risk intelligence map, and then we do things related to risk governance, risk ownership, and risk infrastructure management. Let me quickly go into, many of you talked about SAS 70s. Since all of you are familiar with the aspect of SAS 70, it is where you are getting assurance of a third-party service provider from an independent organization which actually assesses them. It may be specific to your operation. For example, if you have outsourced your, let's say, finance operations, then what would happen is the user controls and other things that reside, or the operations and processes that reside on the provider side are continuously monitored. And the reason I say continuously monitored is a provider can still say that I have a ISO 27001 certification, but ISO 27000 certification or any of those certifications are what we call as a point in time assessment. But when you're looking at a SAS 70 kind of a AE 60 model, it's a continuous monitoring, which is where you do your type 2 assessment, your operating effectiveness, which you really need to continue to do, whereby you're doing it every so many months to say that I assess the provider at point X, X plus 6 months, X plus 2, are they continuing to provide me the same controls? So the same principle would also apply to a cloud environment where you would essentially get it down to the. Now if I were to look at it, what you would really look at in an environment like the cloud, you would need to look at SOC 1, which is your traditional SSAE 16, which is where I said you provide assurance on the financial controls or the financial ICFR, and you have SOC 2, and there is a limited amount of work which relates to security, compliance, privacy and other things that is done in a SOC 1. But when I also do significant number of audits in SAS 70 report, but if you're asking me for an assertion, an audit report or a qualified report related to the security, compliance and audit using a SAS 70 report, traditionally that doesn't happen. For that you would expect that you would need, we would expect that you would need to do a SOC 2 which goes into the details. So if you were to look at your managed operations or your cloud operations, the area that you would really look at is significantly on SOC 2, right? You have your traditional assessment, traditional methods and other things. So one of the key things that you should ask your provider, any provider that provides, do you have a SOC 2 report for your environment, right? And if you're going to enable, web enable some of your services, this is SOC 3 provides an assurance not from a provider, it's an assurance that you provide to your end customer. For example, if let's say a bank exposes their customer care website using cloud services and the customers are not very comfortable about it. Previously what they used to do is when they're saying, okay, you can go and do an online payment and other things, to provide the security, they put the logos like VeriSign, they put it as Web Trust, Sys Trust, and they put all of that, right? The same kind of thing, if you are looking to expose some of your services on the web, which is on the cloud, then you would need to look at a SOC 3, which is similar to the Web Trust and Sys Trust, and it provides an assurance to your customers to say that although I have my services on the cloud, I still am providing you the right level of assurance to do that. So that way what is happening, this provides your basic financial elements which are required. This provides all the IT, security, privacy, governance, business continuity. It provides that kind of an assurance. This provides an assurance from you to your customers. Again, if you were exposing anything, you could go back to your cloud services provider and ask them for a SOC 3. Right? This is one way of assuring, because while you're going to perform your independent audits, while you have ability to audit their environment and other things, at least some sense of control, some sense of risk mitigation you can do when you go in, because if a third-party service provider is saying that he's SOC 2 compliant, then there's a certain level of control that he already needs to have. Because what happens when he's saying that he needs to have a SOC 2 control, then he's bringing an organization, Big Four or other auditing organizations, or those of you who are auditors, who are providing auditors a service, he would bring somebody like you to essentially audit his environment, so an independent audit already resides. taking the independent audit plus the capability to audit him at any time, plus your own independent assessment that you conduct is going to provide you the kind of assurance that you would look at. Okay. What does a SOC 2 do? SOC 2 report specifically addresses one of these key system attributes: access control, security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, privacy. And as I said before, this is what will give you the assurance and which will give you the comfort as you operate as internal auditors. But the key things to take back today are whenever your service provider is providing you this information, the first thing is to ask him, if you were to provide me in a non-cloud environment and a cloud environment, what is different? That will decrease the level of abstraction or confusion that you have, and then you can do a compare and contrast. And then you can say, for these particular things that you're exposing in the cloud, would you be providing me independent validation or a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 or a SOC 3? SOC 3 may not apply, it depends on the service, but a SOC 1 or a SOC 2, are you going to provide me that? The moment you start asking those particular questions, the provider going to start taking a step back, right? He says that these people know what they're really talking about, so let me think about it, right? Because if he's making a commitment that he's going to give you that report, then he better have a separate evaluation done, whereby an organization like us will evaluate his network, his infrastructure, his application, his entire pipe, and say, yes, you are SOC 2 compliant based on the services that you're providing, and we can do a SOC 2 compliance specific to an organization too. Okay. So if you look at a control from a SOC 2, what really happens is it finally brings it down to a control matrix, which most of you are familiar with. It applies to any of the services, which is SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, infrastructure as a service, and service provider and tenant. It applies to all of these. Okay, with that, that's my last slide. And what I would say is, what you need to really look at is cloud computing has a potential to rethink and redesign IT architectures. From your question perspective, it can sort of enhance your architectural standards, optimize them, consolidate them in a different way. If you purely look at it from a cloud, instead of going for a public cloud, you may want to think about a private cloud, because you may essentially reduce your IT infrastructure spend while you're continuing to provide the same services, and you have the security and privacy that you continue to have in your environment. That is one of the business cases I can look at for you. Data governance, security, privacy, migration, cloud are a few major issues that must be addressed. You have to, these should be on top of your mind the moment anybody in the organization is talking about cloud services or exposing certain services to the cloud. It doesn't mean only Deloitte, it means that you need to have an integrated compliance framework which enables both service providers and enterprises to manage security and privacy. Comprehensive control framework reported under SOC 2 reporting framework. This is another form of assurance. On one side, you have your own internal control frameworks. On the other side, you have a third-party assurance in terms of a SOC 2. It provides additional layers of assurance to you as you go into your senior management and say that this particular environment is secure. I'd like to open it up for questions now.
I have two questions. First is that how do you ensure continuity of the organization business in case the cloud service provider goes out of the business? And the second question is that is it easy for an organization to switch from one cloud service provider to another cloud service provider?
Okay. Let me answer your second question first. Yes, if you design the appropriate governance mechanism, it applies even to today managed services and outsourced operations. For example, if you do not have any internal capability of understanding the architectures, if you don't have your IT or IS governance even today in a managed or outsourced environment, for you to pull it back from outsourced operations to your internal operations is going to be a very painful mechanism. In addition to that, you have to obviously have your contractual clauses and other things, whereby if a provider is going out, that you or if you decide that the service is not and the marriage is not working, for you to pull it out, you have to have the contractual arrangement. Now taking the same fundamental tenets or principles and applying it to the cloud, I would say if you define the same kinds of elements and you know exactly where your data resides and you have control over your data and backups and other things are being provided to you on a regular basis, and you have complete control on that particular area. The area that would be a challenge for you is essentially, for example, if you were exposing a customer website or a payment portal or something like that, or where people can come and look at your products and services, and that was being enabled by this particular provider on this cloud. Do you have either internal capabilities to essentially take that over and expose it back into the cloud through another provider, or is the other provider who's going to come and have the capability to take that over? Those are things. So I would say it could be painful, but if you have the right controls over, I would say significant aspect is data governance and the application portfolio or the service that you're exposing, that you have significant amount of documentation and information about that, then I think it will make it that much more less painful for you to break the marriage. Any other question?
Same for giving the knowledge information in the
Knowledge information. How confidential is it? Is it it is intellectual property for you?
Yes.
It is. Okay. And what are you trying to achieve by putting it on the cloud?
Sharing knowledge within our organization.
Okay. In that particular case, you don't need a public cloud. You can do a private cloud and still share that information. Okay. Yeah, you could share that information. You can, and again, if I don't know how intense with that knowledge management service, right? And if it is just a matter of exposing your the knowledge across your organization, then there could be other strategies like portal strategies and other things which still make it available across the organization today. If you take
that we are already having
right
within our organization,
right.
But when we are shifting to, for example, we want to go to the cloud for other services, I think we can go. I think.
Yeah.
But if I put this knowledge management,
what is have you done a business case study of traditional environment versus the cloud environment?
This is the total design and documents,
yeah,
and drawings, for example.
Correct. See, the thing is,
so if somebody gets total thing, it will be a problem for...
No, if you do a private cloud, it is still within your environment.
Okay.
Private cloud is still within your environment. It is not getting exposed to anybody. That is the reason it says private cloud, right? If you're talking about a public cloud, then I would talk about other challenges, since it is critical IP for you and your knowledge of your organization.
So
right?
Everywhere the administrator is having the full power. So what about the cloud service provider administrator?
Come again on the question.
Actually, everywhere the administrator is having the full power.
Correct.
To handling all the data.
Correct.
So here, in case of cloud service, what about the service providers administrator? I'm asking.
They would but again,
how secure my data?
Hold on. Cloud service again, this applies, and the fundamental principle you have to apply whether you're doing a managed service or a cloud. Today, if I'm doing a managed services and I provide privilege identity management to the cloud service provider, I can very tightly monitor what access he has, I can record everything and basically control that very clearly. Same thing you could do it on the cloud too. So it is what happens in most organizations when they outsource their managed operations, because the cloud provider says I have help desk people like every shift and other thing, and he doesn't want to put additional layers where he can actually tightly control like privilege identity management or identity and access management. They then basically provide the ID, administrative super user ID to everybody, and that is what happens. Then organizations who don't have their own internal capability, the moment the provider comes and talks to them, they say, okay, do it. If that is the only way you can do it, go ahead and do it. But if I were in that situation, I would ask the provider, how are you providing that? And if you're really thinking of exposing your knowledge management environment in a public cloud, I would say you have to think carefully, because you're saying your critical IP and other things there, and you have to think of data governance, security and privacy. And the key thing is ownership of that information is extremely important. If it is residing somewhere, someplace, moment it resides. For example, if you are talking of IP residing in India, on your servers here in India, then the laws and regulations of India apply to that particular thing. The moment you take it, like let's say to Manila, somewhere else, China, whatever it is, you don't know what somebody could basically claim that that particular data is mine, and you may not have any legal recourse to it. But it is, I'm not saying that is the situation. There are data governance policies, and there are cross-border things that are managed, but you need to think about all of those issues. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. And if anybody needs to reach out to me, feel free to do so. Thank you. It will be available. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Parthsarathy. We have a quick break for about five minutes now. I'm sorry because we got the session extended. There are other sessions to be taken care of also. And there is also a session next door which is on information rights management, just in case you want to be there. There are some exciting contests and awards also to be given out there.
By Mr. Vittal Raj on digital identity and performing a detailed audit. Mr. Vittal Raj is a member of ISACA's India Task Force and an assurance and management consulting expert and trainer. He has more than 25 years of experience specializing in and directing projects in the areas of IT governance, information security, and IT assurance, enterprise risk management, and risk-based internal audits. Over to you, Mr. Raj.
Thank you. Good morning to you all.
It's okay? Okay. Thanks for choosing this session, which is on the digital identity, performing a detailed audit. Now, before we really go into the session, a couple of things which I thought we would go through. Of course, what we'll be covering is something like this. Look at digital identity. How many of you were in the opening session yesterday? All of you? You heard Kadam, Avinash, and you also heard John, and we saw that in the future, what we are talking about, the digital identity of today, in our own experience, we see that completely transforming the perspectives that we have currently to digital identity. Do you agree with me? Yes? Okay. So we'll look at that. I'm not going to really go into too much of detail here. The second one is, let's look at what we have been doing traditionally. There are many organizations which have significantly transformed in terms of their approaches and experience to identity management audits. But by and large, from my experience, what I have seen is there are still quite a lot of organizations which are yet to wake up or trying to find out, okay, how do we kind of handle the subject of identity management per se? And further, when it comes to the auditing part of it, you're really looking at still kind of approaches which need significant, relook at quite a lot. And of course, we look at the risks of unauthorized access to data and transactions, and understanding the regulatory and multidimensional impacts of digital identity breaches today, evolving an enterprise-wide and holistic approach to auditing digital identity. So I'll be spending not equal but differing times on each of these topics. And you can please feel free to ask any questions that you have at any point in time. We can either take the questions there or I could take it at an appropriate time. What I am speaking on this subject is based on my experience, which is pretty limited, I would say, as compared to what identity management is today. And I still stand as a student before you on identity management. So I would like you to please throw up your experience. So let's treat it as a session wherein we are trying to look at where are we really going and what can really achieve that. So let's look at it. So the first one, what's in it for me? How many of you from the information security IT side? IT, okay. How many of you are from the business leadership side or the business management side? Okay, none. How many auditors? Okay, so the majority is auditors. Okay, fine. So I'm just trying to see what is in it in this session there for me. If you are an audit and control professional, look at the approaches to and the key controls in identity auditing management in the emerging global digital economy. I would rather call it as a fuzzy digital economy. And then look at, in terms of your management leadership, we are looking at what are their expectations. Are the audit reports delivering what they want or what they are looking at? But there is a bigger question. Do they know what they want? So we'll look at that as well. And as far as the IT, look at the current approaches and see, are we delivering to governance? So these will be the perspectives that we discuss. Okay, I'm sure. Any of you who are not from India here? Okay, so you know what a PAN number is, right? Is PAN number something which is to be kept confidential and which should not be really, treated just like that? What are your perspectives on that? Is it something very serious that you disclose it or you should not disclose it? How do you look at it? PAN number? Sensitive. Okay.